Howdy folks, and welcome to another episode of the Mingles with... I've forgotten what this thing's called. That's a good start. Right, let's try that one again. Howdy folks, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. There you go, Jingles. It's good that you can remember what the name of your own vlog series is. You're not losing it at all, you silly old duffer. Right, so with that out of the way, what are we talking about this week? Yeah, good question. Actually, this is one of those episodes where I really have no idea what I'm going to talk about, beyond a couple of announcements when I start, and I pretty much just have to wing it and make it up as I go along. But hey, it's worked well for the last 4 or 5 years. There's no reason why it shouldn't work well today. Oh yes, Tankfest. Yes, well, it's May now, of course, and Tankfest is coming next month. They're doing something new with Tankfest this year, although it's a little late to be telling you about it now because it's already sold out. No, not Tankfest, you can still buy tickets for Tankfest, but the day before Tankfest they're having a Tankfest preview day, and it's sold out already. Seems to be quite a nice programme as well. You turn up at 9:30 and they feed you, and probably give you a bacon sandwich. Then there's an introduction at Tankfest, and then they feed you again. Then they take you around the guest vehicles for Tankfest, and that's all the armour that's turned up that doesn't belong to the Tank Museum, but which is taking part in Tankfest. And the guest armour this year is actually pretty special. They've got a Jagdpanther, and I've seen Jagdpanthers before, but I've never seen one in working order, and they've got a fully running and operational Jagdpanther turning up for Tankfest this year, so you're going to get up close and personal with that. Also, another bit of a coup for the Tank Museum, they've got a French World War I tank, the Saint-Chamond, the last one of its type in the world. So, again, guest armour for Tankfest. You're going to get to be up close and personal with that. They also have a running Churchill. It's not confirmed yet whether it's going to be a Churchill 3 or a Churchill 7, but, you know, there's that. And also, again, something that I haven't seen running at Tankfest before, a Stug 3. Then at 12:30 they give you an hour to look around inside the guest vehicles. So, you know, the Churchill, Jagdpanther, Stug 3 and the Saint-Chamond. Then they feed you again, only this time with the crew, so it's lunch with the crew. Then there's an exclusive arena vehicle viewing, and backstage pass to the tank park, and then they feed you again. And then when the Tank Museum closes, they give you an hour, after hours, to just wander around the museum, have an exclusive look around the museum collection itself, without, you know, the general public getting in the way. So, you know, that's pretty nice. Unfortunately, it's all sold out already. But it's something new that they're doing for Tankfest this year. You know, it's amazing how well the Tank Museum's doing. It's one of the few museums in the world that actually operates on a profit. But then again, I mean, you know, when you've got a collection as amazing as the Tank Museum has, that's not really surprising. And it's not like they just say, you know, here's our stuff, come and look at it. They're constantly organising new exhibitions. You've got the Tiger collection, for example, that opened this year and is going to be running for a good long while. But there's always something new to see whenever I go back to the Tank Museum. Stuff like new collections like the Tiger collection, or new vehicles that have been rotated from the Vehicle Conservation Centre and have now been put on display on the museum floor. I mean, I've been to I can't remember how many times I've been to the Tank Museum now, but every time I go back there's always something new to see. So yes, the Tank Museum and Tankfest coming up next month. Still tickets available for Tankfest, but, well, they do tend to sell out as the date approaches, so if you can make it to Tankfest this year, and yes, of course, I will be attending, as will a whole bunch of other community contributors from not just World of Tanks PC, but also World of Tanks Blitz and World of Tanks Console. We're all going to be there. Full details on the EU World of Tanks webpage that just made the announcement about Tankfest. And as always, I hope to see as many of you there as possible, but get those tickets booked early because it is going to sell out. Speaking of upcoming events, because I have been getting back into airsoft lately, I have a little confession to make, but we'll get to that in a moment. August, Saturday the 12th and Sunday the 13th of August, it's the 17th annual Combat South Airsoft in-country Vietnam reenactment event, which is always massively oversubscribed with hundreds of airsofters and reenactors turning up to take part. I did a video on In-Country 2 years ago, and I'm going back this time around. Now, the last time I went to Combat South's In-Country Vietnam game, I went along as a war correspondent. Now, what that meant was I still had to turn up in period costume, but I wasn't armed, and I could still be shot and killed, and I was shot and killed on several occasions. But it meant that I couldn't actually do any playing, and that was fine because all I really wanted to do was film everything the last time I was there, and I did get hours and hours and hours of footage, which I condensed down into about 4 20-minute, half-hour long videos. This time around, however, I would actually like to get some playing done. And so, well, that's not going to be too much of an issue because now, of course, I've got the GoPro cameras. So when I'm not wandering around as a war correspondent and filming, I can always strap a GoPro on and go and get stuck in. Now that, of course, leaves the decision to be made. Which side am I going to play on? You see, the thing is, what tends to happen, obviously most of the reenactors that turn up are the GIs. So you get all kinds of people reenacting US Army grunts, US Army airborne, US Marines, air cavalry, LR, RP patrols, Delta teams, US Navy SEALs, and so on and so on and so on. And that tends to be the bulk of the people who are coming to the site for the first time, or who only travel down to the site because it's a fair old distance away from where they live, for the in-country event every year. The Combat South locals tend to play the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army. And that works because, you know, they've obviously got the local knowledge of the playing site, just as the Viet Cong had the local knowledge of the ground that they were fighting over in Vietnam. So that does kind of make sense. And I've never played as the Viet Cong before, but I've got the equipment for it. I've got an AK-74, I've got an AK-74 SU, I've got the old cheap and cheerful Chinese cotton AK-47 chest rig, just buy myself a pair of black pyjamas, bingo, Viet Cong. So that's certainly an option. And I also have the US Army 173rd Airborne Brigade gear. Unfortunately, it's been a long time since I wore that, and I've put on some additional lower glacis belt armour, and it doesn't quite fit anymore. So I could do either side, and my decision was sort of made for me today, because I was supposed to be playing Airsoft today. I actually went up to Combat South today, although I didn't play. The weather forecast was rain, and I was kind of tired, as was Rita, so we decided to knock it on the head this week, although we're going up next week. I still went up to Combat South, however, because the last time we were there 2 weeks ago for the Easter weekend, I left my VSR G-Spec sniper rifle with the staff to be upgraded to 500 feet per second, and also handed over Rita's MP5 to be upgraded to 350 feet per second and have the fire selector switch fixed. Now, as luck would have it, there was a little bit of miscommunication between myself and Russell, who owns and runs Combat South. And so he hadn't actually brought either of the weapons along to the Woodland playing site for me to collect. So once today's game has got underway, we headed back to the Combat South shop with him. And this is always very, very dangerous for me, because every time I go to the Combat South shop, I tend to leave it several £100 lighter than when I entered. And today was no exception. To be fair, I have been thinking about making this particular purchase for quite some time. Every time I've been into the shop for the last couple of months, I've been casting envious glances at this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Cold War rifle that's just been hanging up there on the shelf on display, just looking at me and saying, come on, do it, you know you want to. And today I did it. What did you get, Jingles? What did you get? What did you get? I got myself an SLR. Now, that might not mean anything to you unless you're British and of a certain age. The L1A1 self-loading rifle, or SLR, is the British Army name for the world-famous Belgian FN FAL. Now, I actually trained on one of these when I was in the Navy, and it's exactly the replica. It's made by a company called Ares, is just unbelievably good. Everything on it that should be metal is metal. Everything on it that should be polymer is polymer. It is absolutely perfect. The weight, everything is exactly as I remember it. It is a beautiful, beautiful rifle. It's also huge. They don't do gun bags big enough for it, which is something of a problem, because while it does have a very handy folding carry handle attached to the rifle, just as the real thing did, you can't really walk around the streets carrying one of these things. So I got the biggest gun bag they had and just sort of had the flash suppressor sticking out of the top of the bag as I quickly ran to the car with it. Oh, but it is absolutely beautiful. What's this got to do with Vietnam, Jingles? Ah, well, you see. It be madness, but they be method to it. Because the Americans weren't the only people, and obviously the Vietnamese, weren't the only people that fought in the Vietnam War. The Australian Special Forces and the Australian Army also did. And they used this rifle. The details of the Australian forces that served in Vietnam are not widely known. There was a couple of very notable incidents, and there was one 1979 movie made starring Brian Brown called The Odd Angry Shot, which I love as a movie. I mean, it's very much a 1970s movie, but the thing is, it doesn't take itself quite as seriously as American movies about Vietnam tend to, because at the end of the day, they're Australians, and, and they like to have a laugh. But yeah, very good movie. Do recommend it. So that kind of made my decision for me. I'd like to say that I bought this rifle with the intention of going to the in-country Vietnam reenactment in August as Australian Special Forces. But I didn't know. That's the excuse that I used to justify the purchase of this rifle. It is absolutely superb. And because it's single shot, it's semi-automatic, it's not an automatic rifle, it's allowed to be more powerful than a regular full auto airsoft electric gun. The limits here in the UK, bolt action single shot rifles 500 feet per second, fully automatic electrics or gas blowback rifles 350 feet per second, but there's a bit of a grey area when it comes to electric or gas weapons that are mechanically locked to semi-automatic single shot. So this thing, out of the box, shoots at 400 feet per second, which is kind of nice. So, yeah. Oh, it cost a fortune, though. But it's totally, totally worth it. It really did take me right back to my basic training in the Navy. When I was doing my first military training at HMS Raleigh, which is the basic training facility, the entry facility in the Navy, we trained on Sterling submachine guns, which was a bit of a letdown because we couldn't fire them on full auto. It was single shot only. But yeah, but the Sterling was a nice little weapon, vast improvement over the Sten, which it replaced. But when I got to HMS Mercury for my communications branch training, which took 6 months, the military training there was done on this, the SLR. Now, we did drill at HMS Raleigh, parade ground drill, using the SLR, because you can't really do drill with a folding stock submachine gun. So I had handled the SLR before, but it was the first time I actually got to fire one was when I was at HMS Mercury in, it would have been 1990. Yeah. Wow, that is going back. It's nearly 30 years ago. Wow. But it's exactly as I remember it. It's an absolute piece of art. Lovely, lovely, lovely replica. This thing actually bit me the first time I fired it. No, seriously, it did. What happened? They had a tiny, shitty little firing range at HMS Mercury, which is in Leydene in Hampshire. Or was. It's actually a story about that in a moment. They moved the site to HMS Collingwood, but yeah, more on that in a moment. So, in the middle of the woods, they had this tiny little 50-metre shooting range. Yeah, 50-metre range with a rifle this size. It was, God bless you, Royal Navy. Anyway, there was half a dozen of us turned up to do our continuation military training there. And there was a Royal Marine Sergeant instructor. So we received our weapons at the armoury, took them down, laid them out on the bench in front of the firing range, and then the Royal Marine Sergeant asked us to check that the rifles were clear and safe. And he said, right, off you go, run around the firing range. So we all, okay. Ran off in a little circle around this firing range. Didn't take long, it's only a 50-metre range. And when we disappeared around the back of the firing range, he started messing around with the rifles while we couldn't see him. So we got back to the bench, and he said, okay, pick your rifles up and make them ready. The second we picked them up and reached for the cock and handle, he shouted, stop! And we all had to drop and give him 30 push-ups because, of course, we hadn't checked that the rifles were, not loaded. Because that's obviously what he'd done when we'd been around the back of the firing range doing a little run around the range. So, yeah, that was a pointed reminder on weapon safety. And having only ever fired, while I was in the cadets at high school in South Africa, 2.2 target rifles, which have no recoil whatsoever, and the Sterling 9mm submachine gun on single shot only, I was completely unprepared for the amount of kick that this thing gives when you fire it for the first time. And the rear sight basically bit me and left a mark under my eye that lasted for years. So yeah, I've got a lot of respect for this rifle. Very, very, very nice rifle in real life, used by militaries all over the world, and an absolutely beautiful replica, well worth the money. Oh, before I forget, I promised you a little story about HMS Mercury, didn't I? Yes. HMS Mercury used to be the Royal Navy Communications Training School. It was situated on the top of a windswept hill in the middle of nowhere at a place called Leydean in Hampshire, here in the UK. It's gone now, of course. Several years back, somebody decided that the Royal Navy was paying far too much tax on maintaining its estate, all of the land that it owned. So it was decided that they were going to sell off bits of the Navy estate and consolidate various different training establishments, shut them down and basically move them all into one place in the name of efficiency, because you have to realise that whenever governments talk about making their militaries more efficient, what they mean is cheaper. Right? Yeah. So anyway, at the time they were moving HMS Mercury, Leydean in Hampshire, to HMS Collingwood, which is the Weapon Engineering Training School, and an absolutely huge base in Gosport in Hampshire. I worked at the Naval Recruiting and Training Agency, which is obviously responsible for all the training establishments, and I worked within the Finance Directorate of the Naval Recruiting and Training Agency. So I had intimate knowledge, even though I was only, it's not like I was an accountant or anything. I worked as clerical support for the accountants at the Finance Directorate, but I had fairly good insider knowledge of exactly how much all this sort of thing cost. Now, I cannot remember the exact figures because this was a long time ago, but it cost the Defence Estate something in the region of £40 million to move all of the facilities from HMS Mercury to HMS Collingwood. But it was going to save them money in the long term, and we're talking over a 10-year period, in reduced estate tax. So, okay. So they started moving everything from HMS Mercury to HMS Collingwood, and this was obviously huge disruption on the training pipeline as well, getting communicators through, training it into the Navy. But it went reasonably flawlessly until they decided that, oh, hang on a minute, because the Communications Training School wasn't the only thing that was at HMS Mercury. There's also this little thing called the SCU Leydean, or the Special Communications Unit, which is part of GCHQ. It's a very, very top secret, ultra high security communications outpost that shared the same real estate as HMS Mercury, and you couldn't move that. You couldn't move that to HMS Collingwood. That had to stay where it was. So after spending £40 million moving all of the communications training school to HMS Collingwood, they had to keep Mercury open anyway, with a security presence there. Because they couldn't move the Special Communications Unit, which was part of HMS Mercury. Nobody thought of this at the time until it was far too late, and they'd already spent the money to move everything from Mercury to Collingwood. So £40 million of taxpayers' money spent for no real good reason whatsoever. Good job, Navy. Well done. Well, the next thing that I wanted to talk about is, well, actually, it's a freebie for you lot. I met a guy called John Ash when I was at the public release of World of Warships at the Chatham Historical Dockyard, and he was there in his capacity as the assistant editor of a magazine called Britain at War. Well, John got in touch with me again very recently because Britain at War have just updated their website, and to mark this occasion they've just released a special digital-only copy of the Britain at War magazine, which is absolutely 100% free of charge, and which you can download and read at your leisure at the link in the video description. This particular issue, the cover star, is none other than HMS Hood, which is quite appropriate because it's going to be the latest premium ship available in World of Warships. Link down below in the video description for all you lucky readers, where you can get your 100% free digital version of this special edition of Britain at War. And it's excellent value for money. Of course it's excellent value for money. It's not costing you any money, but it's a good chunky hour-long read. It's 116 pages, and if you like what you see in the magazine, then link also down below in the video description to the Britain at War website, where you can either order your magazines to be delivered in the post, or you can download them to read via either the Google Play Store, the App Store, or at the Pocket Mag's website itself. So enjoy your read courtesy of Britain at War magazine, and that's pretty much it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I have a busy week ahead of me. I'm going to be playtesting a brand new premium tier 6 American medium tank. Some reviews are already up on YouTube. I haven't actually yet got to grips with it. It's the M4 Thunderbolt, which of course is the tank that was driven personally by Lieutenant General Creighton Abrams during World War II, the man after whom the M1 Abrams main battle tank was named. So I'm going to be getting to grips with that during the course of the week and expect to see a video review of that at some point on my YouTube channel. And that's pretty much it for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you had a good weekend. And as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.